It's about creating a structure which allows for more focused discussion. To get actually like good nuance, you need focus. A good debate needs moderation.
Artificial intelligence is on track to radically transform the world, perhaps within a few years. Whether that change is for the better depends in part on whether AI researchers can find scalable ways to make the goals pursued by their systems aligned with human values. Each of the top AI labs has their own approach to AI safety. OpenAI uses scalable oversight, training AI on what behaviors are acceptable or prohibited with human evaluation, supplemented with increasing AI assistance. Anthropic uses constitutional AI, a principles-driven training process loosely reminiscent of Asimov's laws of robotics. Meta's plan is to aggressively avoid planning altogether and mock anyone who disagrees. But these are not the only options. Many independent researchers around the world, mostly volunteers and a few paid by grants from charity organizations, are tirelessly working on the alignment problem, with a tremendous diversity of approaches fitting to a field so early in development. My goal with Guardians of Alignment is to shine a spotlight on some of these researchers and their work, to facilitate communication and help them gain the recognition and support they deserve. Today's guest, Kabir Kumar, has taken a far more ambitious and comprehensive approach to this same goal. His website, aiplans.com, serves as a repository for a comprehensive array of alignment plans. It is also a place where you can get involved by joining the conversation regarding the strengths and weaknesses of these plans and which is most likely to succeed. His hope is that, one day, hopefully soon, AI labs will be incentivized to value long-term safety enough to draw from the best ideas available, and AI plans will be a key resource in determining what those are.
I'm Kabir Kumar. So I am the founder of AIplans.com. We are attacking the no retries problem. The idea being that once you boot up a superintelligence, if it's not aligned with you or your values, so on and so forth, then you don't get to go, that didn't work, let's try again. If we did get to try again, we could sort of tackle it almost like every other technology. Our situation would be much better than it is right now. So that's my main focus with AI plans on attacking that problem.
What got you initially interested in the subject of AI safety?
So previously I was in DevOps and doing like startups and stuff. So in September-ish, like a lot of people, I think I saw ChatGPT and I thought, oh my God, the bloggers were right. So about like 5, 6 years ago, I'd come across like Less Wrong for like HTML and all this stuff, and I've dismissed it because I thought no one is going to find a serious problem, a serious important problem, and be smart enough to be the first people to spot it and try to solve it with a blog and some private research, and at that, a disorganized blog. I was wrong. Some people did seem to try that and think that this would be a good idea, which clearly it wasn't.
How do you feel about the state of organization of the AI safety research today?
So it almost kind of gives me hope because if it was very well organized, if it was very well organized, very well focused, and we were in the state we're in now, I would be much more concerned. But the fact that it is so poorly organized, so poorly focused, gives me a lot of hope that if we improve this, and there is a lot of room to improve, then we can see a lot of improvement in Lime itself.
You mentioned the state we're in now. How would you
Yeah.
characterize that?
So I think it's made of multiple things. So when I talk about state we're now, I'm not talking about the alignment problem itself, more of the state of the AI safety field, right? Just how many people there are trying to solve a problem, how they are trying to solve a problem, what is the way that they are organized, what is the way funding is organized, so on and so forth. So first of all, the thing that's most important in any field is the funding. Funding is primarily through donations or grants rather from Open Philanthropy, from EA, and for some other miscellaneous donors. There's a total, I think an estimate last time was $100 million in AI50, which is very silly. I think there was this a graph which showed that actually there was more spent annually on butt plugs than there is on AI safety.
Now, does that count the things like the super alignment team at OpenAI and the work that the companies are putting into it, or is that something where it's hard to really?
Yeah, I would estimate even if you took that into account, it would still be a very small amount compared to essentially every other industry. For example, Anthropic is one of the, and not just in terms of money, but also in terms of time, right? For example, Anthropic is one of the safer orgs or more safety focused orgs, and they bragged about how they had spent over 150 hours doing safety testing. There are more hours than that in a week. One of the safety focused orgs has been bragging about how it spent less hours than there are in a week on safety. That is like one example of the current state.
Detecting a note of cynicism regarding the leaders of the field and solving this safety problem. Am I reading that in, or is that something that's
In a way, it's not particularly their fault. So currently in AI, the liability is really not clear. If you've been harmed by an AI, it's unclear right now who is actually liable, right? For example, suppose you were the victim of a deepfake scam. Who is at fault? Is it the company who made the voice clone technology? If part of a deepfake scam was that someone was able to take someone's, say, social media post or someone's text and stuff and figure out what their patterns of speech were, and they were able to use that to scam you and not just voice cloning, then is there a joint liability between the scammer, the voice clone technology, and the person who made whatever was used to match the speech patterns? And it's unclear. Even with the EU AI Act and the bipartisan bill by Senator Hawley and Blumenthal, it's still unclear. And what this means in terms of 4D companies is that, so in almost every other industry, because there are liability laws, making a product which is not safe is not profitable, right? If you want to build a bridge, if you want to build a car, if you want to build pretty much anything, right, that's going to be used by people and that's going to have some safety concerns. Better safety is more profitable. So you actually spend money on that, and every company spends money on that. It's not just a theater for volunteering and for just talking, which is essentially what it is now. So right now, if an AI company is focusing on safety, they are either doing that just out of the goodness of the hearts, and if they are doing it, is likely to be something which is not very profitable for them, right? Whereas it should be profitable. It should be profitable to make your product safer, and that's not what we currently have, which is why one of the reasons why we're in the state we're in.
Given the kind of state of the incentives, it's not totally fair to criticize them for not doing enough, because like it's amazing that they're doing anything at all.
In a way, yeah. I think there's still responsibility to be held for your actions. Yeah, I don't say things like, bad company doing bad thing. I don't think it's anything like simple as that. I don't know.
So zooming out a little bit from the larger companies, how would you kind of characterize the way AI alignment and safety research is being done, not just at OpenAI and Anthropic and DeepMind, but like in everyone who's involved?
So I'm not an alignment researcher myself. So my view of the field is going to be flawed. And I'm obviously very new to this whole thing as well. So it's not going to be as in-depth as, say, David Ad or something, right? Or someone at Miri. But in my small view, it's a lot of people just working on problems that they find interesting. There's not a lot of ways for people to find out how what they're doing is wrong or right, or basically get fast and effective feedback. The sort of closest things that people have is if they are part of a research organization, then they get feedback from their colleagues, right? But obviously, if you're working with someone for a long period of time, then you're likely to share some biases. So maybe you might get some feedback at the next conference, at the next meetup, or you can just talk about your research and get feedback that way. Or you can maybe post it on Alignment Forum or post it on That's Wrong, right? But obviously the issue of that is a lot of times, if you're an independent researcher, your research or your post is not attractive at first glance. You've not sort of thumbnailed it and clickbaited it, or you're not already well known in the field, then you'll maybe get 3, 4, 5, if you're lucky, comments. And what often happens is your post will just be downvoted and you just don't even know why. So what can I do except maybe try some other random thing? Or maybe we're going to keep going and just make this thing better because that's what I know what to do.
So hearing a big problem of there just not being enough feedback, and this is something that's one of many things, if there wasn't enough already, making it really hard to make progress as an alignment researcher. And I think that goes pretty clearly what you're working on. Tell me a little bit more about your website.
Yeah, so it's aiplans.com. So the end goal of this is to accelerate alignment research. What I mean by this tackling the no retries problem is that what is going to be, any user can submit a plan on the site, and plans are ranked from top to bottom based on a score of strengths minus vulnerabilities. Pretty much every single plan has more vulnerabilities than strengths. So every time there's a new plan posted, that new plan, because it has no vulnerabilities submitted to it yet, it will start out at the top. What you as a user can do, you can not only submit plans, but you can also submit feedback on plans, so in the form of strengths or vulnerabilities. Users can vote on the strengths that you submitted and also on the vulnerabilities, and you'll have two bits of karma. You'll have a karma for strength, and you'll have a karma for vulnerability. Users who have higher karma, their votes will have higher weight. So if an alignment researcher signs up to a site and a mod verifies that they are an alignment researcher, they've been doing work and so on and so forth, then they will start out with 50 karma in strength and 50 karma in vulnerability. The idea being that an alignment researcher is more able to recognize a good critique of a vulnerability, a good strength, so on and so forth. They will upvote at the strengths and vulnerabilities, and eventually people who consistently post high quality strengths, high quality vulnerabilities, they will also gain high karma. And the reason that if you post a plan on AI plans, you will get more feedback will be that because plans start out at the top, and plans will also have a coefficient which will impact the votes. So the higher up a plan is, the more karma you will get for commenting on that plan. So suppose you commented on the top plan and it has a coefficient of 1.5. So whatever vote someone is giving you, that vote gets magnified by that 1.5. So you have more incentive to gain karma by giving submissions to the highest ranking plans. And then if you're an alignment researcher and you have submitted a plan at the top and it's going down the rankings because people have voted on it, and you can actually see, hey, this vulnerability is not right. Actually, or I have a solution for this. But I go, oh, yeah, I can see this vulnerability has some points, but I can make a new version of my plan which solves this. Then what you can do, you can iterate on that. So you can select that vulnerability, you can select multiple vulnerabilities and so on and so forth, and resubmit them and resubmit your whole plan, and you can add in some new information, and it starts out again at the top, and you can iterate and keep going. And you can, what this lets you do is improve your plan and improve your research really fast.
This is a lot more than just the comment section on the alignment forum or Less Wrong. A couple of just general summaries of some of the distinctions that I'm seeing here. One is you're optimizing visibility for the lack of critiques that it's found.
Yes.
And you're trying to spread out the feedback, so it's not everyone commenting on the thing that's the most commented on because that's the most visible because it has the most comments. Yeah. While everything else just completely gets ignored. And then you're also setting that up to really push for iteration in terms of translating the feedback into, well, let's change the plan, and so that you can get higher up again. Basically, being very mindful of the incentives. You're incentivizing getting people to look at plans and making the plans better, as opposed to what's going to be the article that gets the most people to read it, so they spend the most time on the site.
Exactly. Making the incentive structure based around having a good plan rather than just having a plan which looks good.
What distinguishes a plan that looks good from a plan that is good from the perspective of people who are judging it based on what they think?
So it's not just about, perhaps looks good is too much of a misnomer. So that looks attractive, right? For example, interpretability is something that's very attractive because, if we could just understand what's going on, then you can solve it. Then it'll be way easier. It's an attractive idea, but I think it's a bit too attractive. A lot of people
well, not to mention all those psychedelic dog pictures that you get from it.
And there's not enough people working on other areas in the field. which are also important and could be more tractable if they just got past some hurdles.
Do you have any
or some
particular examples of certain plans that you've seen since you've looked at a bunch of them that seems like, wow, this really deserves more attention?
Yeah, so you actually had someone on here, Beric, working on the Ares project. I'm very excited about it. I'd like to see it go further. I would like to see if the scales, having interpretability is good. Something which is inherently interpretable, like the Ares project, I think would be very good. Also, Nathan Helmberger's plan, I think, holds a lot of potential. I think I'm excited to see where that goes. I'm slightly concerned about that because it relies on perfect or near perfect air gapping, which concerns me.
But
But
for the audience, air gapping, what is that?
Sorry. Air gapping is the idea you can essentially have perfect security, so perfectly isolated from attackers. I'm probably not the best person to talk about air gapping, but
I'll
that's
add a little
my
bit of color to it. Years ago, there was like this big debate on Eliezer Yudkowsky proposed like the AI box experiment where he would like have an instant message chat with someone and is kind of imagining that you're a
oh yeah, yeah.
programmer, you're trying to keep a person the AI in the box, and they're trying to convince you to say I let Eliezer out of the box, but willingly, not just like tricked to writing those
Yeah, yeah,
words.
yeah, yeah.
And but you
So
can't say how. And he got them to do that. There was this big debate about it, whether that would actually happen with a super intelligent AI or whether you could
yeah,
close it off close enough. But then in recent times, it's seeming like that's going to totally irrelevant because
yeah,
OpenAI just connects ChatGPT to the internet. They have plugins you can call functions, off of it. There's
yeah.
Auto GPT, and like the idea that we're going to box this stuff. Like, no, we're connecting it to the internet immediately.
Yeah, I think people were also overly impressed by that ELIZA experiment, by the way, or Eliezer
Sure.
experiment.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that people debated about that, but it was a
Um,
big topic at the time, and now it just seems irrelevant.
Yeah. Security in general is pretty bad. We lock our doors with locks, which you can look up any YouTube video on lockpicking and find out how to pick them. Most doors you can just open with a hook. Like pretty much all our security systems are pretty terrible. What we actually rely on in terms of security is surveillance and consequences and incentive structures. That's what actually stops us from not having stuff broken into over time. That and also the fact that most people are pretty nice and pretty law abiding, and so don't actually want to break into stuff and steal stuff.
Yeah, first
Because
layer of defense is you're actually safe and you just want a security blanket. Second layer of security, most people who are dangerous just aren't really trying that hard. And third layer of security is punishment after the fact.
I would say surveillance and punishment, or information gathering and punishment, because actually making good security is really hard, especially keeping good security that stays good as time goes on and people find holes in your security. That's really hard.
And so this is relevant because to your site, because like this is the kind of thing that you would use as a general kind of criticism for plans that like, oh, it relies on this thing that isn't really reliable. Then that's a problem.
Yeah,
That's a problem if it's just assumed.
yeah. So like we recently held a critiqueathon for 11 days. In the first 2 days, we made a list of vulnerabilities, a list of ways that an alignment plan can fail. And one of them was that it's impractical. And impractical has subcategories, one of which was relies on perfect air gapping. Though you might even argue that perfect air gapping is an unsolved problem. Essentially, there was a broad list of 8 different categories, each of which has its own subcategories. We were actually quite surprised at how well that applied to pretty much every single plan. There was basically no plan which was not caught by at least 3 or 4 of those vulnerabilities.
You describe a few more of those
Yeah,
general
of course.
vulnerabilities that you apply to things. I got the sense like one of your processes is that the criticisms that are leveled on plans, like yeah, you can just make a criticism that's unique to that and ad hoc, but there seems to be a kind of push towards having a standardized set of criticisms that apply.
So this was more for just a critiqueathon. So how the critiqueathon was structured was that the first 2 days was spent getting this list done. The next 2 days, which actually ended up becoming 3 days because people just had fun and wanted to keep doing it, was just going through plans and assigning a max of 5 vulnerabilities to a plan. So each participant could assign a max of 5 of these vulnerabilities to a plan. For example, one vulnerability was it has unsolved technical problems. It relies on an effectively flawless simulation. How to make an effectively flawless simulation is an unsolved technical problem, and the plan which relies on that has that vulnerability.
A flawless simulation?
An effectively flawless simulation.
What does that mean?
So, for example, if what it relies on is that we will have a model of an AGI in a simulation, and we'll see how it behaves within that simulation. And if it behaves badly in the simulation, then we'll shut it down. You'll be relying on your simulation corresponding very, very well with reality. Such a simulation has not been made yet, and how to make one has many, many problems.
So you're talking like if someone's assuming that someone can like program the Matrix or something like that, then like that's probably not going to happen before AGI, or is it something more subtle than that?
Kind of. It's the broad stroke that, yeah. So if you rely on some kind of simulation which is very, very accurate and has no flaws and has the whole data distribution, then that is a big unsolved problem of how to do that. And relying on that is a big weakness. Another wonderful example is if it's heavily reliant on an untested and unvalidated theory being exactly correct, right? Like suppose they have a theory that, oh, I think this thing is going to be like this, and they don't have strong backing of that theory being true, and they don't have strong evidence or arguments on support to support that theory being true. The whole plan relies on that. Then that's a pretty big vulnerability as well. There's also the issues of something not scaling. This was a list which was made in the first 2 days. Then in the next few days, what people did was just assign a vulnerability to a plan. So for example, they might have said, okay, this plan has vulnerability for BI, it has for CI and for DII, and you can just add that very quickly, and let you add a lot of vulnerabilities to plans very quickly.
Like I think the perfect air gapping and some other things that's some of them seem like they make a lot of sense. Some of the other ones they might like someone might look at it and say like, I'm not sure that's really a fallacy or a flaw, or this is debatable, or
yeah, I think absolutely.
And like, yeah, how do you deal with the question of subjectivity in terms of what is a flaw?
So I think there's definitely a lot of nuance to be held. And I do not think that this thing by itself, you should go, okay, this thing has this, therefore that's it, end of story. Because that's why we had the rest of the days of critique fun, right? So something that we did after we would assign a vulnerability, the next 2 days, people split off into pairs. The pair would pick a specific vulnerability within a specific plan, and one would argue for it, one would put forward arguments for it, the other would put forth arguments against it. Then the next day, they would swap. This actually ended up making very good, detailed, and nuanced arguments and criticisms of plans, because even if perhaps you weren't experienced in alignment or in AI and stuff, because you got to see someone else who might have been know more than you making the same sort of points for the stance, which you would then debate for the next day, you get to then use those. And also you get to sort of self-reflect on your own ideas as well. I expected it to go well, and it went even better than I thought it would go. And then we had, after that, each person in a pair would sort of rotate. So then you get to practice the same stance again for a new partner at the time. Yeah, ended up making some really high quality criticisms of plans in a very short amount of time. And again, there was very much, because it was this whole structure of, going back and forth, you got a lot of nuance, right? Which I think is needed. And I don't think you can really have a good vulnerability without going into that. I think any vulnerability with just quoting this is insufficient.
So a common theme I'm seeing in this and in the plans in general is it's not about saying which is being the ultimate judge in terms of which plans are good and which ones are bad and trying to really like cut things down immediately. It's more about facilitating discussion so that what seems better or worse emerges as part of the process.
Exactly, yeah. It's about creating a structure which allows for more focused discussion. To get actually like good nuance, you need focus. A good debate needs moderation. If you aren't sure what is a way that a plan can fail, suppose you see an alignment plan and it's a bunch of theoretical maths and computer science, and you go, I have no idea where to start with this. You can use this list. You can just go, hey, does it meet one of these? Like, can I just use this to find a hole in that? And then you can inspect that hole. You can inspect it, see, okay, is this actually applying? Is this true? If it does apply, how does it apply? What might be the reasons for it not applying? And then you can use that to find out more. And because you're focusing on one specific part, even as a complete beginner, you can get a lot of nuance in. Like we have people in the criticathon who hadn't really done alignment stuff. We had data analysts, we had pediatricians, we had a whole broad strokes of people. We had an alignment researcher as well, and obviously he was very, very good at it because he's an alignment researcher. But still, that focus allows for high quality work to be produced.
I'm interested in this topic of like what like facilitates discussion. And you've mentioned moderation and some structure.
Yeah.
Also, focus is being something.
Yes.
Like and with those like lists, like giving people clear starting points so that they're not lost. My first impression of like some of these critiques was it was like, oh, this is too confident. Like it's not, you know, including all the nuance and where it might not apply.
Yeah.
But really, it's a starting point for discussion, not an
Yes.
ending point. And sometimes it's
Absolutely.
actually helpful to just stick your neck out and say, this is my opinion, and then get pushback and then find the nuance afterwards than it is to try to
Yes.
start with the perfect criticism that's like totally applicable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like maybe even before you say it, you can just think, is this true? Could this plan be relying on perfect data gapping? Could that be a problem? Is that a possibility? It's really a list of possibilities. And then you can use that yourself to look at a plan and go, could some of these apply? If you look at a lock and you have in front of you like a list of ways that locks can be picked, the exact way that specific lock can be picked might not be in exactly one of those things on the list. But you can look at that list for an idea, right? You can look at lists and say, oh, are the hinges on the outside? Oh, they are. Okay. Maybe they're not so easy to pop out, but maybe that offers me to do something to the hinges, right? You can say, oh, can I get at a latch? Oh, I can. I can actually see the latch right there. So maybe I can hook something there.
In this example, a hinge on the outside of a door in a lockpicking context, that's not automatically, oh, this door is flawed from a lockpicking perspective, but it's certainly a thing that I should pay attention to if I've just encountered the door and I'm trying to assess it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a vulnerability. It's a possible vulnerability. It might not be. Maybe for some reason this particular one isn't, but it's the thing to look out for, as you said.
Are there any like highlights that came up for you in terms of particularly productive conversations that have emerged in some of these plans?
I think conversation in general has been very good. I think what's really been the best thing I've seen when the focus can happen and when the back and forth can happen. One of the ways that those could go wrong was if the conversation would diverge from the focus. Like if they said, does this plan rely on human ethics? And one was debating for, one was debating against. And then they started talking about, does alignment in general rely on human ethics? Then I would come in and go, okay, remember folks, we're talking about this specific plan. Where in this specific plan does it say whether or not it relies on human ethics? So for example, something else that they would do in section 2 when we picking vulnerabilities in plans was not just saying, oh, this plan has this vulnerability. You would quote which part of a plan has the vulnerability, right? So you say on page 2, section 2, or page 2, section 3, so on and so forth, and then you quote, this text is the one that has this vulnerability. Because if you go into the whole field of alignment, does alignment itself require human ethics on all that stuff? It's very, very easy to get sidetracked and not actually get the good work done. But when that focus is there, then you can get that good work.
One thing I was struck by in seeing the site as just one source of value for it is even more basic than that, of just having this thing where you can just scroll through and see all these different plans out there and just kind of get a sense quickly of just what's been done. And they're like, they have the titles there, so I can say, oh, this catches my attention. Like, I want to know more about this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually one of how the site's actually being used right now. So right now, the whole voting system is actually not set up because we need to integrate our database with the Eigenkarma network. So we're going to be integrating with the Eigenkarma network to allow the whole weighted voting thing. Because with Eigenkarma, they've solved so many problems that we would need to solve for a voting system. They've solved circular voting and sock puppets and all that stuff. So it's better if we just make a fork of that and change it for our needs. rather than making anything of our own from scratch. So that's still left to be done. But yeah, in terms of the size of it at the moment, it's just, as you said, it's a useful resource. Multiple researchers have just told me that they've found papers on there for their research. I think currently it's about 180 plans.
Suppose like I was a alignment researcher and I have my own like lab and I'm writing some paper and came up with some novel approach and I wanted it to get featured on AI plans. How would I do that?
You can just log in or register as user, and you get an account, and then you can just submit a plan yourself. If you've submitted a paper on archive, we have a feature where you can just put in the link for the archive paper and get the archive details, and it will just fill in the details for you. And then you just embed the PDF code, and you can just submit that and post it. Yeah, so this is how the site is looking at the moment. We're updating constantly, so you can see the abstract, and you can click here and to go to post, right? You can scroll down and you can see the PDF and you can see, oh, cool. This one by some researchers at Berkeley. And then you can also go down and see, okay, there's no vulnerabilities yet, but you could add one if you like. And you could add a feedback as either a vulnerability or as a strength. And currently, plans are ranked from top to bottom based on the least criticized to the most criticized. So the plans at the bottom are actually the ones which have the most criticisms submitted. So people saying this only solves at point, or it requires an impulse amount of data. You can also use the search bar. Suppose you're interested in interpretability. So you can see, okay, cool. There's, these things which to do with interpretability. Or if you're interested in incorrigibility, you can have it and so on and so forth.
So if you wanted to revise a plan for vulnerabilities, what would that look like?
So suppose you're one of these researchers on here, and then you can scroll down here, and you can click this button here, revise a plan for a vulnerability, and then it will submit it. Then you can submit a new plan with the details already filled in, right? And you'll get the pop-up saying that it'll log the post permanently and clone a new one to revise it.
Suppose I had like a plan that I'm submitting, and it's very similar to something that exists already. Not the same, it's enough to be worth its own post, but there's just a very large amount of overlap.
Yeah, so actually we've currently not really seen that because each kind of research paper kind of does go in its own direction. But in terms of if there is just a lot of text which is the same thing, what I would expect for that is for those plans to basically be treated like any other, really. So if that plan has the same vulnerabilities and stuff as another plan, then it'll just get those vulnerabilities added to it. And if it has those same strengths, then it'll have the same strengths added to it. If it's a clone, obviously that's a different story.
I'm thinking more along the lines of, people working independently sometimes come across the same idea.
So I think that's actually a good thing. It's good to have more variations on the same idea to see which variation has more vulnerabilities and more strengths. Those should both be on the side.
And these are organized by, like I noticed you typing earlier at one point of searching by interpretability, and in a way that's kind of things that are similar. So if you're interested in a topic, you could see a whole group of things in some ways.
Yeah. So you can just type in any word really, because it's just a search bar really. You can just say ethics maybe, right? And you can see, here's the plans of ethics in title or ethics in the abstract, right? So currently it's scanning through the abstract and title. We're going to be changing this to be scanning through the post as well.
What's some of the development direction that you see this site going? It's useful now already as a repository. We can kind of see it growing in the direction of being a source of feedback and debate and discussion. What's your long-term plan for alignment plans?
So my long-term plan for this is firstly accelerating alignment research. Again, shift the incentive structure. Essentially what it is going to become a leaderboard, right? It's going to be a leaderboard of the best plans and the worst plans. And no highly skilled ML researcher is going to be infused about working for a company whose plan is on the bottom of the leaderboard. I'm actually working with the creator of AI Safety.careers, or we'll be having sort of a logo of each sort of organization next to a plan, or We might or we might not. We just have it somewhere in the corner. What this will do is suppose a company like or a lab like Redwood Research has more plans near the top. What I would like to have, what I think would happen is we'll see a shift in the flow of talent, right? Someone who might have gone to work for, say, Meta, sees, oh, Meta's plan is actually all the way on the bottom of the leaderboard, and Redwood Research is actually at the top. Maybe I'll give them a try, see if their jobs are decent, and they'll go, you have more people working at Redwood Research than you do at Meta.
So your hope is to make performing well on a site like this have some prestige attached to it, to change some of the culture, around AI and safety work.
That's one of them. Yes, and also in terms of policy, one of the difficulties in AI policy at the moment is you come off as a Luddite if you say, "Hey, we should ban this AI stuff," right? You're saying, "But it's so useful." Right? Why would we ban it? What else could we even do? There's nothing else which I can just ask the question and it can tell me 10 different versions of the answer. What other technology can I use to get 10 different highly detailed medical answers in 2 minutes? Right? There's nothing else which do that. But with this, obviously, there's 180 different ways. If you can just say, hey, here are the plans which are on the bottom, which have 50 plus vulnerabilities with them, and they've not been improved, right? They've tried to improve them and they've actually gone to the bottom again. Then you can say, here is a list of reasons which are posted by researchers and upvoted by researchers, right? Which is showing that there's a lot of things wrong with this. Let's ban the worst ones, like we do in any industry. Like asbestos is banned because it is one of the worst building materials you can build with. It causes a lot of harm.
So creating like an easily accessible information source for advocacy groups in holding the AI labs to the fire and or holding them accountable by saying, like, if they don't have a plan at all, obviously that's bad, or if they're proposing something has tons of holes in it
I think showing that there's alternatives, showing there's alternatives that are better options helps policymakers a lot. It helps them go, okay, I can actually make something which is not, making me look like a Luddite to my voters, and I can actually just go, okay, here's the bad architecture, we will not have that, and here's a good architecture, we'll have that instead. Or here's the less bad architecture, we'll have that instead. That's something which can be done more easily than just, hey, no one train any AI ever.
Right. So if a politician's wants to enforce some kind of safety rule, and then OpenAI says, yes, we got that, we have scalable oversight and RLHF and that sort of thing, and then Anthropic is like, yes, we have constitutional AI and these rules, like we're doing that, and then the politicians is in this place of either saying, that's no good, go home, like no AI for you, or okay, I guess that's good. But if they can say, like, hey, there's a lot of other options that you're not considering here, that also kind of brings up this kind of broader question. I think that's a real challenge and a need in alignment, since so much seems to be happening in the larger community of independent researchers or small outfits and so on, and also just the fact that it's a new field and very divergent. It's probably not mature enough to converge fully yet. You might have some great idea and a great team and whatever else, but if you're not on one of the few frontier companies that has access to all of the compute, and OpenAI is not listening to you, then it almost doesn't matter, because your plan just won't get implemented in the models that are big enough to matter.
Yeah, that's very much an issue. With this, not only can you as a researcher post on here, and you can almost get kind of prestige if your plan is near the top, because each one has the office name there, and if you stay near the top, then that is impressive. It's impressive if you have a plan which survives the critique and has actually strengths as well. So originally it was just ranked by least criticized to most criticized. Why we changed that was actually during the critique phone, we found that there are some plans which, even if they have a lot of vulnerabilities, they have a strength which is by itself worth highlighting. Like, say, the Gata framework, that has a lot of vulnerabilities, lots and lots of vulnerabilities, but it has the strength of the heuristics, which are very valuable, and they should be highlighted. So we've sort of finding out that that exists is why I've moved from just critiques to strengths minus vulnerabilities.
This kind of comes back to the evaluating the criticisms themselves. So some of the things I saw listed on there was like only solves inner alignment, only solves outer alignment. How do you distinguish between just a limitation of scope that someone just wants to focus on something solvable and someone else will deal with the other thing versus like a flaw in that like this just won't work? Because it kind of seems that this problem's big enough that it might not just be one plan that solves it all.
Absolutely. So I think if a plan, say, solves outer alignment well or solves inner alignment well, that is a very good strength. That is a very powerful strength. And so I would expect that to be competed as a strength, and then because then that will be upvoted. Even if it has some downvotes, or it goes down rank because of those vulnerabilities, if it has a strength, like, okay, this actually tackles inner alignment very well, or this tackles outer alignment very well, then it would still go up in ranking because it has a strength.
So you've mentioned alignment researchers using this as a source of getting feedback and trying to make their plans as good as possible, also from the perspective of an audience, trying to understand what's out there and to discuss it in a focused sort of way. What about policymakers and people who are interested in AI governance? How might someone like that use the site?
So some company or lab saying that we've got really good safety, or we care a lot about safety. Suppose someone has been harmed by AI and they want to make a case that the company did not do enough to make their AI safe. That's where something like this could be used. They can make the case that the company used an architecture which has been shown to have lots of flaws, to have lots of vulnerabilities. And the company chose to use that architecture instead of using a more robust architecture. Like, you can say that, okay, my landlord is responsible for my lung conditions because they chose to keep asbestos as insulation rather than swapping it out for a better insulation, which would not give me lung cancer, for example. I'm unsure if asbestos actually gives lung cancer or not, but it damages lungs in some way. With that, you can actually make a case because there is an alternative option. They could have chosen that, but they chose to keep using this.
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily have to just be like one or the other, but just like there was this hole in their system and they could have supplemented it, or whether it's using it instead of or whether it's an addition to. And they just didn't address this known problem in some form.
And just the fact that it is a known problem, that is publicly on a list, that hey, this thing is a known problem and there are alternatives available. They chose to put out a product even knowing that there is a known problem within it and there are other options. I think that by itself will be very powerful. It'll be powerful not only for folks seeking compensation, seeking liability, it'll also be powerful in terms of lobbying. So suppose a company gets charged with, say, reckless endangerment, then it can be made a case that you are using something which is known to be harmful, which is known to be very flawed. You are using power lines which have been shown to be unstable. You are using a form of steering which has been shown to be faulty. Right? If a car company puts out cars which have brakes which are known to just randomly stop working, then they can be held liable for that. They are expected to know the state of their brakes, and that can be assessed in comparison to other brakes. And just being able to compare plans quickly is very valuable.
If someone comes to your sees this, they're really interested in your site, they want to get involved in some way, what are some ways people can get involved?
So one of the ways is the critique-a-thon that we're going to be holding on the 15th. So that's actually a very good way to just get sort of started in reading plans in alignment and actually understanding alignment. Again, because of that focus, because it's such a broad field, it can be very easy to get lost within it and go, okay, I'm going to learn this, and then oh wait, I need to learn that. Oh wait, I need to learn this. And wait, I need to learn this. Oh, I need to learn the philosophy of this. Oh, actually, I need to learn the maths of decision theory. Oh, actually, I need to learn maths of complexity theory. And these are entire fields which multiple geniuses have dedicated their lives to. no matter how smart you are, like as you're not going to focus on one of those things with, you're not going to focus on all of them. You're just not going to be able to do that. It's better to focus on one specific thing and be good in that and be good in a way that's useful. And something like the critique font helps you get started on that, or just submitting a critique on a plan. That's something also is quite simple. You just say, I think this plan has this vulnerability for this. Or submitting a strength. You can say, I think this plan is good because of this. Or if you're an independent researcher or you have an idea for alignment, just submitting that as well as a plan is also an option as well.
Is the critique-a-thon or things like it something that's going to be happening again?
Yeah, so it's going to be held either every month or every other month. So I would expect it to be held again at the latest in December, possibly October.
You're seeing this later. There'll very likely be another chance to get involved in a focused sort of way. And even if there's nothing going on, just going onto the site
Yeah,
and leaving some critiques and trying your best to be a part of that discussion
yeah.
is a way people can get involved at any time.
By October, I'm expecting that we will have the voting system fully set up, and we're also going to be making a sort of tutorial, kind of like Metaculus has, where you can kind of get started, and in the tutorial you can sort of earn points. Timed multiple choice quizzes are actually pretty useful for getting some basis of how much a person's expertise is. We're going to be setting it so that if you have less than 50 karma, you can actually use that timed multiple choice quiz to get a bit of karma based on how well you do in that quiz. And it's also a good benchmark for getting an idea of what topics you need to learn, because you can actually, oh, I got this question right, I got this question wrong, and this question right or wrong was on this topic, so I can go and learn a bit more about alignment.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Wish the best with the site, and hope people watching this go and engage there. This is a small way that you can get involved in alignment just directly by participating in the discussion. There's enough focus here that you don't necessarily have to be intimidated by the fact that, like, oh, I don't know this field super well. You can still get involved. Beyond involvement, this is also just a way to get informed, because one thing I've kind of remember feeling in just hearing all the news of AI and all the capabilities coming out, and the kind of doom posts that Eliezer puts out, you kind of get this feeling like nothing is happening in alignment and like nothing's going on. And yeah, there isn't enough, given the kind of timelines that are involved, and there's some chaoticness. But there's also a lot of creativity, and there's a lot of people who are passionate and working on this sort of thing. And just seeing that and seeing the diversity of ideas too, that it's not just like one thing that's really hard. There's like a lot of different approaches is a good way to, it's really stimulating.
It's also something that's going to be useful is once we have more posts, especially with the upcoming critique one, if you can see what kind of problems are the most common, like what are the strongest sort of vulnerabilities which plans tend to have. If you're research, you can save a lot of time. I'm going to make sure that from the start, I'm not going to have this problem. Or if you're interested in solving stuff and building stuff, you can go, okay, this is a problem which keeps coming up. I want to see if I can just tackle that problem. I want to see if I can solve that problem. And then that makes a whole bunch of other plans better because that problem is now solved, right? Like suppose there's a technical problem like making a very good simulation, right? That's very hard. And that's somehow a lot of plans are relying on that. And you say, actually, I'm going to make progress on that. I'm going to tackle that and see, okay, specifically, what about a simulation is hard? And I'm going to make that easier. Or you suppose there's some other problem which plans rely on, and that's really hard, like perfect air gapping or something like that. And you say, I want to tackle that.
This site lays the foundation for, but I can imagine becoming more significant later on, is the idea of meta-analysis. There's like people producing like base level research and base level like ideas, but then some of the best ideas happen from seeing lots of different things and seeing the patterns between them and seeing the commonalities and just the inspiration that comes from that. And in order to get that kind of inspiration, you just need to get a lot of the lower level sort of things fed in. And this would be a way of just kind of priming that creativity pump and seeing all the different things out there. And hopefully that leads to new insights and inspirations and ways of looking at the problem that just isn't available when everyone's siloed in their own individual focus.
Yeah, like popping the bubbles and getting all the work mixed into one thing and focused has already been proven to be very powerful. Just for somehow no one had just thought to make a list of alignment plans before. So just already by itself, it's good for that. But obviously, as it evolves, it's going to be more and more a useful resource that you can look at and take inspiration from and make really good progress on the problem.
Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me. It was great being here.